Start. All right. So, good evening. We're studying the Tractate of Makkot. We are on page 3a on the bottom. There is a Mishnah. Now, last time we discussed. We are discussing conspiring witnesses. That's the topic of the first chapter, but it seems like it's being used as a gateway to discuss other topics. So last time we got a crash course on Ketubah, the document that we use for marriage. Today we're going to get a crash course on loans and interest and sabbatical year, all connected to conspiring witnesses. So the just a short introduction. Conspiring witnesses that we're talking about here are those who are came to let me just mute. Sorry, came to give a false testimony about someone, and as they were giving their testimony, they were trying to, with their testimony, they were trying to trap someone, victimize someone, and get them to pay some monetary loss. They will have some monetary loss with that testimony that they provided. So the law is that if we caught them conspiring, they have to pay that monetary loss. So you wanted to do this to someone else, you get the punishment yourself. That's the basic rule that we're discussing here. Now, so let's dive into the Mishnah, and the Mishnah is discussing about a monetary loss that seems not seem to be obvious, and how do you measure the monetary loss here? So מעידים אנו באיש פלוני שהוא חייב לחברו 1,000 זוז על מנת לתנם לו מכאן ועד 30 יום והוא אומר מכאן עד 10 שנים. A court is sitting and discussing a loan. Okay, and the borrower is saying, yes, I borrowed money from so and so, and the conditions for the loan were very simple, that I have to pay it in 10 years. I borrowed 1,000 zuz, and I have to pay it in 10 years. Those two conspiring witnesses are showing up as witnesses. Says, no, we were there, and we saw the act of the borrowing, the loan, the transaction happened in front of our eyes, and our testimony is that we saw that the condition was that he has to return the 1,000 zuz in 30 days. So it's a big difference if you're borrowing something for 30 days, or you're borrowing, it's 1,000 zuz is a large sum of money. If you're borrowing it for 30 days, you're borrowing it for 10 years, right? So we have here, they turn out to be conspiring witnesses, meaning they were somewhere else when the transaction happened. They were in a different state, and we caught them. So now they need to pay up, be punished and pay up for what they wanted to inflict on the victim, okay, on the borrower. So the question is, what are they supposed to pay up? It's definitely not 1,000 zuz, because everybody agrees that the borrower is supposed to pay it. They're not causing him the a loss of 1,000 zuz, right? They're causing him just the loss of paying the money early, right? He was supposed to pay it according to the true conditions of the loan in 10 years. And they're coming and saying, no, you have to pay it in 30 days. It's a big difference. It's worth money, not 1,000 zuz. So what do we do? So the Mishnah is saying, עומדים כמה אדם רוצה ליתן ויהיו בידו 1,000 זוז, בין נותנה מכאן ועד למד יום, ונותנה מכאן ועד 10 שנים. You basically have to estimate what would a person want to pay for that privilege of holding the money for another almost 10 years instead of paying it now for 30 days, which is very simple concept. There are several problems. There is one main problem with this concept, and that is, which is ribit, which is interest. Okay? We know nowadays, you go to get a mortgage, a 10-year mortgage, you borrow, $100,000 for 10 years. You pay a certain amount of interest, a certain amount of percentage in interest rate. Now, this is not something that's allowed according to halachic rules. The halacha says that a person is not allowed to lend with interest, right? Now, so how are we going to measure? I mean, if we're measuring how much it's worth, that it sounds very much like an interest thing. So there are several answers. I'll mention two. One answer is that yes, that first of all, there is a way to borrow with interest, and that is if you borrow from a non-Jewish institution. A non-Jewish institution is allowed to lend. They can do whatever they want, and if you, as an observant Jew, want to go and borrow from that institution, you're allowed to do it. So there is a way, and therefore you got to see what's the going rate for borrowing the money for 10 years rather than for 30 days. That's answer number one. Answer number two, we look at it, the estimation is being done the other way around. You don't look at what would a person who borrow would want to pay for keeping the money for 10 years, but rather what is the lender would pay to get the money back early. The lender is supposed to get the money in 10 years, and now they have an opportunity to get it in 30 days. It's worth something for them. What would they agree to pay for that privilege of getting the money early? So that have nothing to do with interest, because they're just forgiving. They're not paying into. The borrower does not pay interest. Anyway, whichever way we look at it, the bottom line is that the conspiring witnesses will end up paying a certain amount of money, which is basically the estimation of what the value of the money for 10 years minus 30 days. Okay. That's the Mishnah, and that's the conspiring witness law that we were discussing. Now it's sort of a gateway to a whole different discussion, and our Mishnah is being used to measure, to understand that other discussion. What is the other discussion? So Amar Rab Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Amalvet Chavaro L'Eser Shanim, Shvi'it Meshamto. So let's just have a little bit of an intro. We're all familiar with the laws of Shemitah, sabbatical year. No, I'm sorry. No. Pick it up, I'm sorry. It's my machine decides. No, my machine decides that he wants to. Oh God Almighty! Don't start it. Why do you want to start my machine now? Nowadays, the machines have their, a whole idea of what they want to do with a mind of their own. Anyway, you still see my screen, right? Okay. So, what is the law of sabbatical year? The law of sabbatical year, we know that the regular part of the law is that we're not supposed to, in the land of Israel, we're not supposed to work the ground, to plow or whatever. We have to let everything grow wild and let the ground rest. That's one part of it. But there is another part of sabbatical year, and the sabbatical year there is an abrogation of debt. What does it mean? The law says as follows: Miket sheva shanim ta'aseh shmita. And at the end of 7 years, you do a sabbatical. V'zeh dvar shmita, and that's the laws of the sabbatical year. Shamot kol baal mashe yado, that you should abrogate anybody who lent money, asher yaseh bere'o v'lo yigosh, that if someone lent money before the sabbatical year, they are now, when the sabbatical year arrives, they are not allowed to press and to demand payment, because the payment is null and void. So if you lend someone $1,000 before the sabbatical year, come the sabbatical year, according to the Torah law, and there are ways of overriding it, we'll see in a second, but the basic Torah law is that $1,000 does not need to come back. You know, the borrower does not have to return it. Why? We will talk about it some other time, but that is the basic law. Now, when the verse that's talking about this basic law is saying two things. It's saying, number one, that that the actual loan doesn't have to go back. Number two, that the lender should not press and oppress and pressure the borrower to give the money back. Now, this is the Torah law, but nowadays, just so you know, to get you to the end of the discussions for a second, nowadays there is ways around it. Why? Because Hillel Hazaken, one of our scholars, saw that commerce is really dying right before the sabbatical year. Because if your next year is a sabbatical year, it's not Shemitah, right? We're in the 6th year now. Next year is year number 7. So who would lend money this year if they know that if comes the end of the year, they lose the money? Nobody wanted to lend anything. So the whole commerce system stopped. And people stopped borrowing, and you can't really, keep the economy going that way. So one of the solutions were that one of the solution was that the lender who is holding the contract, right, the loan contract, is giving the loan contract to the court and telling the court, listen, now this loan belongs to you, and you are going to go collect in my name. So this way, a person, an individual, is not doing something against Torah law, and based in the court which is allowed to the law that the Torah is talking about an individual. It's not talking about an institution like the court. So the court is the one that's going to hold the contract, hold the loan, and be able to collect. So that's the basic arrangement. So what we do today, it's called pruzbul. Pruzbul means it's a word in Aramaic that means that I'm giving, I'm assigning my loans to you, okay? And basically, we have to say it right at the Erev Rosh Hashanah that's coming up, okay, right before, when we do Atarat Nedarim, when we do the annulment of the vows. We also have to say at the end that we are giving Beis Din the right to collect all of the debts that we have, so we can collect them. So we can collect them in the name of Beis Din. So that's the basic arrangement. Okay, now. So, what does Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel say? Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel say as follows. If you lend someone for 10 years, during 10 years there is at least one sabbatical year, sometimes two, right? So what happens, and so the condition of the loan was that here I'll give you 1,000 shekels, and you're going to give it back to me in 10 years. Comes the sabbatical year. Year number 4 is the sabbatical year. So Shmuel says that the loan is obligated, is annulled, is finished, is gone. There is no more loan. It's nullified, and the money doesn't need to go back. Now, what was the discussion? What's the thinking? ואף על פי, ואף על גב דעה שלא קרינן בלא יגוש, סוף עתי לידי לא יגוש. What is the reason that a person should not be pressing charges or demanding payment? Okay? The reason for it is, it says that in the Pasuk, as we mentioned, that number one, the loan is nullified. Number two, that the person should not be pressing the borrower, right? That they should not exert pressure to get the money back. The rabbis learn that those two parts of those two conditions are two parts of one condition, basically. That means that when is the loan being nullified? When you exert pressure. Now, on year number 4, there is no pressure because it's not time yet. Right? Suppose the loan is due in 10 years. Year number 4, there is no pressure that needs to be exerted. So, one would think that because there is no pressure, therefore the loan stays. Right? Because the person is not, the lender is not calling the borrower on year number 4, pay me the money. There is time till year number 10 to pay the money. So, therefore, we would think that the annulment of the loan, the abrogation of the debt, does not apply. Comes Shmuel and say, no, it does apply. Why does it apply? Because the loan, in essence, eventually is going to be coming with pressure. The payment always comes with pressure. You always get a demand letter at the end. Okay? So, because there is a demand letter in potential here, even though it's going to be in 6 years, now it's year number 4, you're just going to get the letter in year number 10. But because the pressure is here, even though it's not clear and present, but it's there in potential, therefore, the Shemitah is doing its thing and the loan is abrogated. This is the statement of Mr. Shmuel, it's brought to us by his student Rav Yehuda. Okay, so that's the Braita. Now the question is from our Mishnah. How can you say that? Metiv Rav Kahana. What did we say in our Mishnah? In our Mishnah we say as follows: that if there are conspiring witnesses that come and say that the person, the loan was given for 30 days, but it actually was given for 10 years. So what did we say? We're measuring the amount of money that it will be worth it for the person to keep the loan for 10 years, and that's the money that they have to pay. But the question is obvious here. If, according to Shmuel, the loan during the sabbatical year is nullified, so if someone borrowed for 10 years, that means they borrowed and they're going to keep the money because the sabbatical year will come and pass and they're going to keep the money. So now the conspiring witnesses are saying, no, you borrowed for 30 days. So they're actually giving them a loss of the whole 1,000 shekels. Right? Because without their testimony, the sabbatical year will arrive in 3 years, 4 years, and the loan will be forgiven. And now that they say that the loan is only for 30 days, they're obligating the borrower to pay money. So they should be paying 1,000, because we caught them in the act, they should be paying the full 1,000 zuz, right? And we see in the Mishnah that that's not the case. So what we can ascertain? We can ascertain that the Mishnah is basically telling us that the sabbatical year does not abrogate the loan. Otherwise, how the Mishnah doesn't work, right? How can you estimate only the difference between 30 days and 10 years, which is a smaller difference than the entire sum of the loan, right? Is the question clear? Yes? No? Maybe? Maybe. Okay. So that's the question. So the question is, how can Shmuel say, from our Mishnah, it seems that the loan is not being abrogated during the sabbatical year. So how come? So what's the story with Shmuel? What does Shmuel think? So Amar Rava, Acha b'ma yaskinan, מלווה על משכון ומוסר שטרותיו לבית דין. דתנן, מלווה על משכון ומוסר שטרותיו לבית דין, אין משמטים. So Rava is saying, listen, you coming to me with a Torah law, but the Torah law we know was it didn't work for commerce, and therefore we created this whole idea of pusbul. We created the idea of assigning the loan to Beis Din, so the loan can be maintained. It's not going to be abrogated. So our Mishnah is talking in such a loan, the loan that was given to Beis Din. And therefore, there is no question, the loan was given to Beis Din, the lender can collect as the messenger of Beis Din, of the courts, and therefore, in order to estimate what is the difference between a 10-year loan and a 30-day loan, is just the difference of how much money, how much is it worth to pay it later rather than earlier, and the Mishnah is okay. And what Shmuel is talking about a loan that was not given to Beis Din. If a loan was not given to Beis Din, indeed it's being annulled, abrogated, nullified. So that's one answer. Another answer, says Rabbah, there is some loans come with the collateral. Okay, so you want to borrow $1,000. So you go and you say, I want to borrow $1,000. The lender is telling you, so give me collateral. So I said, no problem, I'll give you my guitar. It's a Gibson guitar, it's worth $3,000. Here it is. You hold the guitar until I pay you the $1,000. So you have, I don't run away. In this case, this kind of a loan does not get annulled during the sabbatical year, because there is no real loan here. The value of the loan is in the hands of the lender. The lender has the guitar, right? The lender has they have the money. That sometimes have more of what they gave, right? So it's basically was a transaction of like buying and selling. I gave you the guitar, you gave me $1,000. In 10 years, I'll give you. We'll do the reverse. But there is no real loan here that's open. There is no open transaction. And in that case, this kind of a loan that has enough of a collateral, that kind of loan, everybody agrees, does not get abrogated during the sabbatical year. Okay, so that is the back and forth. That's why we mentioned it, because there was a question from our Mishnah. Now, we have something which happens a lot in the Gemara, and that is another version. And the other version is totally the opposite, okay? So let's just summarize what we learned, and then see how the other version of this exchange, how different it is. So, what we said before is that Shmuel says that the loan gets abrogated during the sabbatical year. The other version says no. That Shmuel says exactly the opposite. The loan does not get abrogated during the sabbatical year. Now, typically, why would you have this kind of a discussion? It's because many times the Ika de Amre, the second version, is the prevailing one. So you had a version of what was transpired in the yeshiva 500 years ago, but you have two versions of it, because they didn't have recordings, and it was, submitted from rabbi to student to rabbi to student, sometimes the information came incorrect. So the second version many times is the prevailing version. So what is the version here? The version here is that Shmuel says that it's not. The loan does not obligate, a sabbatical does not obligate a loan that is not due yet. And why? Because we said, because it's not due yet. So there is no oppression. There is no oppression. There is no pressure from the lender. So therefore, there is no reason to obligate it. Okay, so that's the second version. Now, the discussion also continue back and forth. So before, in the first version, when we said that Shmuel said that the loan is being nullified during the sabbatical year. We asked a question from our Mishnah, that according to our Mishnah, it seems that it is that it's not obligated, right? So how can you say that it is? Now that the second version is saying that Shmuel says that it's not obligated during the sabbatical year, so what we bring from our Mishnah is support. It seems, says Amar Rav Kahana, that we have support for this notion that the loan is not being obligated during the sabbatical year from our Mishnah, because our Mishnah is discussing the conspiring witnesses and the fact that you need to estimate what is the value of keeping the money for 10 years rather than 30 days, and that's what you need to pay. That means that you don't need to pay the entire loan because the loan is not being obligated, so it's support for what Shmuel is saying. So the last part of the discussion is also reversed. So Amar Rava. So Rava saying, no, from our Mishnah we can't bring support to what Shmuel says, because our Mishnah is talking about a different situation. Our Mishnah is talking about a loan that has collateral, or a loan that was given with a principal to the courts, and that's the reason it's not obligated. Not because that loans are not obligated during the sabbatical year. This particular loan is not, but regular loan without collateral and without giving it to Beis Din is being obligated, and therefore our Mishnah is not supporting Shmuel. That's the back and forth again, but it's all the same words, the same players, the same people, but exactly the opposite. Anyway, I'll pause for a second. If anybody has questions, then we'll move to something else. Yes, no, maybe? Good? All right, okay. Okay, so since we mentioned one saying of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, we're bringing another one. That's the way the Mishnah works, the Gemara works, right? We bring a saying from about the same topic from the same rabbi. So אומר לחברו, הרי אני מלווה לך על מנת שלא תשנתני שביעית, שביעית משמטת. Okay, so let's just do a little bit of an intro here. There are a bunch of rules in the Torah, right? And if we have a transaction amongst us, we cannot say that whatever we do between us, we're not going to listen to the halachic ruling. We're going to create our own rule. So typically, it says someone who's making a condition on what's written in the Torah, his condition is not a condition. Okay, that is the basic law. That any condition that the two individuals are making between themselves, which is against the ruling or the halachic ruling of the Torah, doesn't hold water. You cannot make your own laws. Now, however, there is an override. There is an opinion that all of that is working in laws that are not monetary laws. In monetary laws, there is an opinion that you can override what the Torah says. Why? Because it's my money, and I can do whatever I want to do with my money, right? I can take my money now, and I can go to Livingston Avenue and put it in the middle of the street and leave, I can lose my money whichever way I want to lose my money, right? I can go gamble it in Vegas, So, because I have full control over my money, if I want to create some sort of a transaction, a monetary transaction with someone else, and that will not go according to the Torah, some say I'm allowed to do it because it's my money and I can anyway lose it. I can shred the money, You
wouldn't charge the percentage?
No, you can't charge the percentage. But if you want to do, there are other monetary laws, like the law that we're talking about here. And what's the law that we're talking about here? I want to borrow $1,000. I go to a person, and it says, lend me $1,000, but with Shvi'it, with sabbatical year, we're having a problem. So the lender is telling you, you know what? I'm going to lend you money, but with the condition that the sabbatical year is not going to work on it. I'll lend you money. Here is $1,000. Sabbatical year, Shemitah is coming next year. I'm not going to, let's not consider it. Let's skip it, Let's disregard it. So Shmuel says you can't do it. That if you're making conditions on what the Torah is saying, that doesn't work. So comes the sabbatical year, the loan is being obligated, and there is it doesn't matter what conditions you made when you actually took the loan a year before that. Okay? So according to that, we can think that Leima Kasava Shmuel, it seems that Shmuel Savar Matne al ma shekatuv b'Torah, v'chol matne al ma shekatuv b'Torah no batel. According to that, we can understand maybe that Shmuel is of the opinion that you cannot make conditions on what the Torah is saying. You can't stipulate or void what the Torah is saying, even in monetary transactions, right? This is what it seems to be saying. So, according to that, we have a problem, because we have somewhere else that we have a clear indication that Shmuel is saying that you can override, you can stipulate, and you can void some of the laws if it's a monetary transaction. Where is that place? Where are we saying that? So just another intro, okay? There is a law in the Torah that rule that organize the sale, the laws of selling. You want to sell something to someone, okay? I want to sell you a laptop, okay? And the laptop costs $1,500. All right? I come to you and I say, here, this laptop, I'm going to sell it to you for $2,000. And you say, okay, let me buy it. I'll buy the laptop. And then you go online and you see that the value of that laptop is actually $1,500, not $2,000. So I overcharge you 33%, right? $500 more. I overcharge you 33%. The halacha is that this kind of a transaction is annulled. You have to give you back the money, you have to give me back the laptop, whatever, and we cancel the transaction because the transaction is not valid. There are, however, the Torah recognizes that there are different prices and people can sell in different prices. So they say if we're talking about commodity, something that the price is set, you can sell it and you can vary from the market price up to about a 6. Okay? So let's take a round number. You buy a laptop for $600. Okay? So if you buy the laptop for under $700, it's still okay because you paid less than 6. However, if you sell it for $800, it's more than a 6. Then the transaction is canceled. Okay? This is basic the law of hona'ah. Hona'ah is cheating. Okay? You're not allowed to cheat. Price gouging, you're not allowed to do it. Okay. So there is this Mishnah, this Baita, that says if someone tells their friend, okay, let's do a transaction. I'll sell you something, you buy it from me. But we're going to stipulate that even no matter what you find later on the market price to be, the price that we agree, that's the price. So therefore, you go afterwards home and you realize that you paid, 50% more. Sorry, Paul, we made an agreement that the price is the price that we agreed, even though it's more than the 6 that the Torah stipulates that is the valid variation in price, okay? So if somebody is saying, let's disagree this limit of price gouging by the Torah of a 6, what do you do? So Rav says יש עליו הונאה, ושמואל אמר אין עליו הונאה. So Rav is saying that you can override this law, and if we agreed that I'm selling you a $600 laptop for $800, and then you get home and you realize that you were cheated, you can go to court and reverse the transaction, even though we agreed that the price is a price. That's what the opinion of Rav is. The opinion of Shmuel here is that no, because we agreed that we can override the transaction, that we can override the laws of Torah, and therefore we agree. You agree to be cheated. You agree that this is what you want to pay, even though everybody else pays less. So it's okay. So what do we see here? That Shmuel is saying that you can override conditions of the Torah in monetary transactions. So before we said that we can't, right? In the case of Shvi'it, of sabbatical, we say we can. And here in the case of price gouging, you say that you can override it. So which way, Shmuel? Which way are you saying it? So the Gemara is coming up with a very, very interesting twist. And the Gemara is saying there is a big difference on how the condition between the buyer and the seller occurred. What you can do is you can say it in two different ways. You can say that I don't care if you exploit me. I don't care if you exploit me, and therefore it's against me, and I agree to accept that. It's as if I agree to give you, $200 for nothing. I'm allowed to give you a gift, $200, right? I don't need anybody. Nobody can tell me not to give you $200 for free. So if the agreement was that the exploitation is against me, that's allowed. But if the condition is that there is no exploitation law applied, that is already something against the Torah. Against the Torah, you can't do it. You cannot say that the Torah is annulled. You can say that, my pocket, I want to give you extra $200, exploit me, no problem. But you cannot say it about the Torah. So that's the difference. That's why Shmuel is saying that a person cannot go back, because the language over there was, I'm willing to be exploited. The same thing says, when you're talking about sabbatical year, it works the same way. If you're saying that the obligation of the debt is against me, so then, you can override it, because how do they say it? If we're saying that during the sabbatical year does not abrogate the debt, so if the condition is on the sabbatical year, you can do it. But if the condition is about the oppression, the pressure about me individually, I'm allowed to do it, because I'm allowed to lend you money, and then you're allowed to give me money back, and we're allowed to, it's a monetary transaction, we're allowed to stipulate between us the condition of the transaction. But if we are mentioning the sabbatical year and say whatever the Torah is saying sabbatical, that does not apply to us, that we cannot do. That, therefore, it works both ways. So Shmuel is actually very consistent in his opinion, both in the sabbatical year as well as in exploiting and price gouging. All right? Okay, next. All right. So the next Braita is also, because we sort of stepped into the whole idea of loans, the whole laws of loans, we continue in that vein, and we're mentioning another law of loans. תנן, המלווה את חברו סתם, אינו רשאי לתובעו פחות מלמד יום. Okay. So, if I ask you for, lend me $100, okay? And we didn't specify for how long. I'm just saying, can you borrow, can you lend me $100? You gave me $100. You're not allowed to come to me and ask for the $100 back in less than 30 days. If I come and tell you, give me $100 for till tomorrow, we set time for it, right? But if we didn't say time, just say give me $100. So the minimum that you have to let me hold $100 is 30 days. That is the Braita that we say. So now let's look at it a little carefully. So Sava Rabba Bar Barchana Kamei de Rav Lemeima. So Rabba Bar Barchana, when he was in front of Rav, he was thinking to say as follows: that Hanemile b'milva b'shtar, the law of it in shedetarich dekatav shtar batzir mitlatin yomin, aval milva al pelo. There are two ways of getting of establishing a loan. Okay, there is a loan with a contract, with a loan document, and there is a loan, orally, like with a handshake. Okay, it's called milve al peh. Milve al peh is when we didn't write anything and we just shook hands. Okay, so Rabbi Bar Chana was thinking as follows: when there is loan document, and in the loan document there is no date, it says just that so and so is borrowing $100. Okay. We're saying that in order to write loan documents, nobody write a loan document for one day. It's too much trouble to write a loan document for one day. So the minimum that the rabbis are estimating people will want to write a loan document is 30 days. And therefore, if you come with a loan documents to court and say, to the borrower and say, give me the money, you got to give him, there is a date of when the transaction took place, when the loan took place, but it doesn't say when it has to be returned. You cannot demand it in less than 30 days. However, if it was just a handshake is meant to be short term. Give me, I'll give you in the afternoon, I'll give you tomorrow morning, I just, I forgot my wallet. So then you can, a person can demand the $100 back right away. That's what Rabbi Bar Barchana was thinking to say. So Amar Lei Rav. So Rav is saying, Hachi Amar Chavivi, Echad Amalve Bishtar, Ve'echad Amalve Al Peh. So Rav told him, no, that he heard from his uncle. His uncle was Rav Chia. Who was Rav Chia? Rav Chia was the apprentice of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rav Chia, Chia is not a Hebrew name; it's an Aramaic name. It's an Aramaic name for Chaim. So in Aramaic it's Chia. So Chia was born in Bavel, and he later on made Aliyah and worked under Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So Rabbi Chia is a significant authority because he was sitting right in the editing room when the Mishnah was written. So much so that he was, just as an aside, Rabbi Chia was taking everything that didn't make it to print and collected and wrote a book. So there is the Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote, that's the official Mishnah, and then there is Tosefta de Rav Chia. Those are all of the Braito that didn't make it to print in the Mishnah. Rav Chia collected them and didn't want them to get lost, and he created a book. And it's mentioned because it's legitimate opinions as well. Anyway, so this Rav Chia dude was the uncle of Rav, okay? And Rav told Rabbi Bar Barchana that Rav Chia, that my uncle, and he used the term of endearment, Habibi. He said that the saying about the loan, that the borrower, that the lender cannot demand the money in less than 30 days applies to both loans that are given with loan documents and loans that are given with a handshake. Either one, a person cannot demand, you have to wait for 30 days because nobody really borrow money for less than 30 days. And that is, I think, where Tanya Namiachi, one more thing, Tanya Namiachi, we say also another Braita that supports what Rav Chia says, and what Rav says, המלווה את חברו סתם, אינו רשאי לטובו פחות מ-30 יום, אחד המלווה בשטר, אחד המלווה בעל פה, that someone who borrow and does not specify the term of the loan, they cannot, they have to give it at least a minimum of 30 days. That is where I think we should stop, because we're starting a whole different thing later. Not different, but a little longer. Questions?
No, this is in the in Kosher Mishpat. This is the halacha also. The 30
Yes.
days, right?
Yes. A lot of what we're learning now is actually applied to real, bottom line Jewish law. Like you cannot make conditions on what's written in the Torah, etc.
Yeah.
So with this rule, whether they make condition or they don't make a condition, the bottom line is different, right? One you can, one you cannot. But the fact is, the fact is, this is strange to me.